Hello again. This will be a continuation of my previous video, so I'll recap that real quick. I created my beautiful moldy character, made some basic flint tools. Then I made a dugout, burned down my entire field with a pit kiln, panned for materials, somehow got temporal gear from panning, found a treasure hunter trader, and got enough copper to make a pickaxe. I decided to make a prospecting pick, so I had to go pan for more copper, which brings us to where I am now. Without further ado, let the agony commence. My day started out normally, unbarricading my door and dealing with some trespassing pests. After I cleared out my immediate area of unwanted horrors, I noticed there was a metric shit ton of rifts nearby. I decided to get to work on getting some copper, and after getting home and storing the zinc I wouldn't use for some time, I went out for some food. Once I ate, I decided to melt down that copper and pour it into my prospecting pick mold. However, I got a bit bored of waiting and poured my watering can on it to cool it quicker, which worked. Now, the more experienced vintage story players are probably screaming at their monitors now, but for those of you who don't understand why this is a bad idea, while you can quench forged items in water, liquid molds go boom when they get wet. This would lead to some immense pain later. After making my pick, I decided I wanted to try it out. But first I made some more kilns so I could make some crocs and an axe mold, which I would never use. After lighting these, I had some daylight that I spent surveying the area with the prospecting pick, which led to me finding some copper. It was poor quality, but I was just happy I didn't have to pan anymore. After getting a decent amount, I began heading home, grabbing some berries along the way. After getting home and realizing I didn't have even remotely enough to make an anvil, I made some more raw tool molds, and went to bed. I set out the next morning to get more copper, but after almost having a heart attack when a cave-in happened, I decided to look for a different vein. However, I quickly gave up when I was looking because I was really low health. So I decided to head home. Since my molds weren't done, I elected to read a survival guide about mining, which led to a realization that many were probably shouting at the screen at this point. Wait a minute. Hammer allows you to crush copper ore. Do you mean to tell me? Oh my god. After I convinced myself not to drown my character, I got to panning again. While I made decent progress, even getting a copper spearhead, I realized I was starving midway, so I decided to run out and get some food. While I did almost get a boar, I was really low health, so I ended up dying. Thankfully, I set my spawn with temporal gear I got from panning, so I was able to get my stuff. After retrieving my items, I decided I needed to do something about inventory space, since I was constantly running out of room. Thankfully, I learned about the hunter's backpack, which only did add one spot per pack, but it was something. Thankfully, it only needed pelts and cattails, and I had been saving the pelts. Nah, I'm just kidding. I thought skins were useless unless you had a barrel, so I had 0. I went out hunting, which did get me some pelts, but I decided to go pan some more. Finally, I had enough copper for a hammer. I then poured the molten copper into the mold, and decided to speed along by using my watering can to pour on it. After all, it worked. Shit. Thankfully, it did give me some copper back, so I wasn't completely back to where I started, but I did still need 5 to fill the new hammer mold. Except, I didn't make a new hammer mold. And when I realized this, I panicked and filled an ingot mold instead. So I decided while I waited for the hammer mold to be done in the kiln, I'd build a watchtower where I could spend the temporal storm and be safe. After putting thatch on the roof of the tower, I went back to my mold, seeing it was done. I grabbed my copper ingot and was going to melt it back down when I realized I need a chisel. After collecting what remained of my ever-dwindling sanity, I decided to prepare for the temporal storm I was sure had to be on the horizon. So I decided to stock up on flint arrows for my crude bow. After I had a decent amount of arrows, I decided to pan for more copper, as I still needed a hammer. However, as I was panning, I got the message I was terrified of. While the storm was only light, I was still nervous, as I had aptly proved I wasn't capable of towing it with a wolf, much less incomprehensible clay demons. However, I quickly learned that a temporal storm approaching does not mean a temporal storm was seconds away. After I finished shitting my pants in my tower, I decided to get some thatch to finish the roof. Even after doing this, the storm still hadn't arrived, so I set out to find some more cattails so I could finally have a bigger inventory with my freshly cured pelts. Once I made my new backpack and found some more hides to cure, I hunkered down and waited for the storm. When the storm hit, I was quickly brought back from my involuntary hallucinations by 3 boathorns trying to take my head off. Since my tower was not remotely safe, I closed off the windows with the prepared rammed earth, and proceeded to try and turn the biggest, ugliest bastard I saw into a pincushion. Thankfully, this big jackass couldn't hit me, so I riddled him with arrows until it stopped moving. Unfortunately, this boathorn just had a skill issue, and another one promptly gave me a free head piercing straight through my shooting window. Oh shit, that's not good. I respawned at my cabin and realized I needed to run through a storm back to my watchtower, which I'd blocked up. Thankfully, I got there with little issue and took pot shots until the storm ended. Personally, I did not like this acid trip. Would not go on this ride again. However, I quickly found out that killed creatures despawn, and one of the big ones I killed disappeared before I could loot him. However, I managed to kill another boathorn, and I lucked out once more. Temporal gear! Nice! After I cleared my inventory, I went back to panning, where I finally got enough copper. Heading back home, I started melting the copper down, and I grabbed the hammer mold I finished up in the kiln. After pouring the molten copper into the mold, I decided to get more cattails to make another hunter's backpack while I waited for it to cool. While waiting, I also cooked up some more meals and stored them in crocks so I could progress without worrying for meals for a while. However, I decided the hammer should be stored in a blacksmith shop, so I decided to build out around my watchtower to make a blacksmith on the first floor. After I had a frame to get an idea of what size I wanted, I returned home to make my new copper hammer. I went to sleep after, deciding to set out and go mining in the morning. However, I wasn't able to get much copper, only relying on the vein I found previously since my prospecting pick broke. While I was able to get some copper, I needed to pan for a bit more to get enough to a prospecting pick, which I quickly got and melted down. Since I had nothing else to do while the pick was cooling, I decided to get more cattails so I could finish my last 2 hunter packs. Once my pick was cool, I decided to go out and prospect the pick. While there was not a lot in the vein I already mined, there was enough copper readings in the prospecting mode that I decided to go spelunking in a nearby cave. However, I kept getting jumped by drifters, so I immediately decided to leave. I wonder if that was what nighttime in California is like. So I decided to use my last bit of durability to try and bleed out the last bits of copper in the existing vein, as there was some still there. This was a terrible mistake. Jeez! Fuck me. After getting my stuff, I decided to mine a bit more, but my pickaxe finally broke. Since I only had 5 copper, I went out and started to pan. Once I replaced my pickaxe, I decided on a different strategy to get copper. Vertical shafts. After pinpointing where I wanted to dig, I started going down, which went well without any sort of issues whatsoever. After collecting my items from the cave, where I started making better progress after digging around these shafts. Eventually, I found a cave system. and since there was no monsters around, I decided to explore a bit. Eventually, I was node searching randomly when... Hello, sugar! Once I mined all the copper my grubby little hands could carry, I returned home, only discovering I didn't get enough for an anvil. Oh my god, I do not have enough. However, since it was only a little bit that I needed, I decided to pan one last time to get the copper I needed. While it was cooling, I decided to put more clay vessels in a pit kiln and lit it. Once I came back, the anvil was cool, and I quickly placed it in my open-air blacksmith. I decided to heat up my accidental copper ingot and forge it into my first item. I decided on a saw to make planks, which will make you ask why. So I can make barrels? Or a real bed? No. I want planks to replace my mortal enemy. That door that has been the biggest pain in my ass this entire playthrough. Finally, I could begin the Copper Age and start making better tools and equipment. But that story will come later. In the next episode. We go ahead. Bruh. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like the content and want to see more, hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps me out. See you in the next video. Later.